The best way to predict the future is to create it. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders prepare for the future of work now. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's go. We're back with another episode of the Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks 8. I'm Shawn Golias, the thought catalyst with HumanWorks 8, and I will be your host for today's conversation. But I'm not alone. Joining me will be AJ Cruzy from the team, and we'll speak with today's guest, Lynell Meeth from Bank 59. Remember, this podcast is all about helping organizational leaders like you prepare for the future of work now. In a few minutes, you'll hear from today's guest, but here's a little bit that I found out about Lynell. With over 25 years of HR and consulting experience, she's enjoyed working side by side with executives on strategy, brainstorming with managers on engagement and retention, and advising HR professionals on compliance. Lynell started her career in the banking industry, moved to a nonprofit employer association, then a tech company, and is now back to her roots in banking as a talent development director at Bank 59. This is a local community bank headquartered in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. What inspires her? Learning from others, seeing the positive, finding a solution in the midst of all these challenges. Oh, and I learned maybe even dark chocolate. So without further ado, let's get started with Lynell. Hi, Lynell. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me, Shawn and AJ. And I will say probably the most important piece of that bio was the last one, the dark chocolate. Always brings a smile to my face. So,
I love that because you know what what first question was going to be to you. What's one thing from your bio that I didn't mention that you're most proud of personally or professionally? So we know the dark chocolate. Anything else I didn't mention that you're just proud of in life or at work that might be a good highlight?
oh boy. I mean, being a parent of two adult children, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is seeing them start to thrive in careers of their choice. And yeah, that's just so cool to see. And and also them, displaying compassion to others is kind of like the one thing that as a parent, yes, you want your kids to be successful, but kindness to others is also a very, very important goal. So I would say I'm very proud of that.
I like both of those, Lynell. What is neat, we're going to be talking about people and culture, but when it comes to your children, that's like real life, right? When you see it that way, isn't that the truth? I mean, that's what matters most. Well, let's try to learn a little bit more about you, Lynell. We always start the podcast with what we call the three parts of the mind to try to learn about, what really makes Lynell tick. And the first part of the mind we talk about is the cognitive, how you think. And we ask, what hidden talent or skill do you have, Lynell, that listeners or people may not be aware of? Or you could even take it, what's something you're smart about that other people might not be aware of?
Very, yeah, thought provoking question to get us started. I mean, the first thing that pops to mind, I don't know that it's actually a talent or skill yet, but it is something that I've started to pick up. It's more of a personal thing, tap dancing. And where that came to be was, through some kind of personal reflection, I thought about some things in my life, especially as a child, that I really felt joyful about. As kids, you have great memories of maybe, riding your bike or playing catch with your parents. And one of the things that I really enjoyed as a child was tap dance. And so I've thought about that as I've gotten older and now I'm later on in my years as an adult. And I always wanted to pick it back up. And I've recently done so. And I have to say, it's just one of those things I'm working on. It's not a talent yet, but it's one of those things that just makes me feel joyful. And I love going to tap dance every week.
I'm envious. I couldn't move these legs in a tap dancing routine. AJ's laughing. I'm glad this is not being videotaped because he would know that would be
You can do better than I think you could.
maybe. But here's what I love in what you said there. And I think there's a learning there is that as human beings, whether it's at work or life, we have to find those things that bring us that joy. And I'm glad you reflected back to childhood. But I also hear in you, and tell me if this is true, is this tap dancing learning and building that capability and sort of that practice. It sounds like it's going to give you better energy. It's going to energize you. Do you think that's the truth?
I think absolutely that's the truth. And it's something that it's challenging, so it's something that really does stretch you a little bit, which is always fun to do. But it really does it makes you feel so good when something just clicks in your mind. And especially when the mind and the feet work together, which is very important in tap. And when it just happens, like that feeling of like, "Oh, I got this. This is good," is just something that, yeah, it's fun to replicate.
Well, I like your click pun, and you may not have meant to do that, but that's fantastic. And you said something in that too that I think as we get into this other two parts of the mind, you said the mind and the feet working together. And it's kind of like when you're in that zone, right? Where it's all working, you know, how you feel about it, how you're thinking, and then that body physical kind of thing. I love that. Dark chocolate and tap dancing. I like it. So what the second part of your mind is your affect and your personality, what things you like, how you feel about things. What's a favorite of yours, Lynell? That could be a favorite food, movie, book, vacation. You could take us anywhere to learn about you. Any favorite jumps out at you?
I would say a favorite right now happens to be a book that I'm reading, and I received it over the holidays, and I have not gotten through the whole thing, but many chapters of it, and it's something I can't put down, and it's called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And it's super interesting because she talks about things that if you've ever studied psychology or behavioral science or neuroscience, some of the things she talks about isn't new, but the way she puts it in practical terms and simple kinds of thoughts and strategies is totally up my alley. And so I can't put the book down, and it's just fascinating. And it really is kind of focusing on how you can reframe your mind to think about the things that are in your control, the things that are not, and how you choose to show up and react in certain situations. And I love it. So that's the thing that's kind of my favorite right now.
Well, you start your new year reading list, and you've got the first book on it there, Linnell. The Let Them Theory. I like that. My last part of your mind that I want to speak about, is what we look at is how somebody's natural instincts. If you had the freedom to take action your way, Linnell, how do you jump in and start a project or do work? What's your natural way of taking action?
Yeah, I found that my kind of natural instincts is a little unique in the sense that I love details, but I also love creativity. And so usually you don't find that your brain can maybe work with synergy of between those things, but I found that that's just what works for me. And most of the time when I start any kind of work or project, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about the why. Why are we doing this? What's the problem that we want to solve? What impact is it going to have? What's our motivation here? And really get down to some fundamental things so that we can really understand why we're putting time and energy into something. And I think that really helps kind of get the right perspective before you move into something.
That sounds like you from what I know about you, Linnell. It's all about detail specifics and really using that information to make good decisions, to move stuff forward. I mean, that's how you're wired. I see that in you. And I'm so glad you brought that up. But I always want to encourage people, though. Sometimes they say, but this word creativity, it sometimes sits out there and people go, I'm not creative. You are, whether you approach creativity through information, through process, through improv. There's a lot of ways to bring creativity. And I think you do that with information and those details and those specifics. We got to talk more about that another time. That could be a whole nother podcast, Lynell. But give us a little bit of insight now in the work you do at Bank 59, your role and what you're doing there, adding value your way.
Yeah, so I lead our talent development strategies and provide learning opportunities. So that's kind of the focus and forefront, but the beauty of what I do is working for a smaller organization, I get to have variety and wear many hats. So while that's my focus in my role, I also get to work on engagement and culture and wellness initiatives. I work on succession planning and also support a line of our business in an HR business partner capacity. So that means every day is different. Every day I could be doing a little bit of recruiting, I could be doing a little bit of coaching, and so all of that blends together really well.
Wow. Sounds like hands full. And it sounds like you like that variety.
I really do. I really do.
Yeah. I can tell. And to me, every industry has challenges. You mentioned the word culture in the cultural sort of area. So let's talk banking. How has that industry changed over the time you've been there, back, maybe back and forth, and now there, and as you've grown? How have those changed, and what are they now when it comes to culture and banking? Anything come to mind that way?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've seen as really constant in banking is the relationship building with customers. I think over time from when I was in banking back in the 90s and where I see it today, you might think, well, technology has really, improved in certain aspects, which it has. It's given us a lot more opportunity to do our banking differently, but you still have the need for a place to go, a brick and mortar, so to speak, for people to actually have a conversation with another human being about something very important and personal in their life, which is their finances. And to be able to have a conversation with someone who truly cares about their ability to save for a vacation or a retirement home or be able to, spend down their debt and really have that conversation and relationship with someone, that's what I've seen hasn't changed. There's still a need for that, and that's something that really holds true for a lot of banks in terms of how well they, interact with their customers, really kind of speaks to a lot of their success.
I love that, tying to that purpose. How do you keep your employees sort of connected, their daily work to that purpose? Is there anything you do specifically that helps remind them?
Yeah, there's some great values that I think ground us, all of us. And I do new employee orientation with all of our new hires, and I it's one of my most favorite days of the month because I'm so energized first of all by people who are starting new jobs, the enthusiasm. I just love it. But on top of it, I get to spend time with them talking about the culture. I don't spend time going over the handbook. That would be extremely boring. But I do talk about our culture and what it means for us to be grounded in the values that we have, and how I hope that in their experience and working with us, I hope they truly feel that, because if they do, and they see that their own personal values align with our values, they're just going to love working there. They're just going to love it and they're going to want to stay. And I'm also a very realistic person. It's not like every day is, rainbows and sunshine and, that's just not very realistic, but I typically say if, 70 to 80% of the time you feel these things, your interactions with other people who work here are grounded in our values and you really experience that, that is just gonna place that you're really gonna enjoy working for and at. And so the 4 values that we have that I talk about that we're really grounded in is, one is passion. And when I talk about passion, I talk about it more in the sense of enthusiastically wanting to serve others. And in banking, that's a lot of their financial future. So if that's something that, you really love helping someone save time, save money, make money, have peace of mind, those kinds of things, you're really going to enjoy working here. The other thing is integrity, which seems very common sense for the banking industry, but it's really doing the right thing when no one's watching. It's really understanding your how your actions match up with our values. And so the third thing is respect. And with that, I talk about how we look at the whole picture when we're looking at situations. So, not being kind of one sided, but really looking at the whole picture and treating people with kindness and dignity. And then the fourth thing is humility for us. And that means we love learning from each other. We love sharing that information with each other. So we don't hoard it and we share it, and that when we don't know about something, we ask, and we don't pretend to know the answer. We find out what the answer is, and we respond. So we try to keep it very simple. And with that, I think that simplicity really resonates with employees who, when they hear that, they say, "Oh, I already kind of act like that in my own, life. Like that's kind of how I approach life in general." That's when I make the connection that, yeah, well, that tells me that I think you're gonna like working here.
Linnell, I love those four values you mentioned. And what I appreciate the most about this, and I think you get it, and we work with a lot of organizations that have values, and sometimes values are just words on a wall or words in that handbook. But the way you spoke about them, you turned them into how you turn this into actions, how you live those every day. And that's so important now. And I loved how you tied it from your organizational values that they have to be connected to one's personal values. Like you said, it's magic when those two things connect. And that's where you get that engagement and retention. So hooray. And I bet you try to return back to those on a daily, and those have to be kept alive at the same time. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Love how you talked about orientation. So when I think baking, Linnell, then you release these people into the wild. They go off into all these branches. I think banking and I think about branches. So you're setting this amazing expectation. You're making it actionable, and you're sort of having that real moment with those new enthusiastic people. And then off they go, I would imagine, for the most part, into a branch or into a different place. Then there has to be some challenge to how do we keep all these branches and all this talent out there in the world still connected to those values? They're still connected to one another, because just like your customers, your client base, they still need that place to go and have a real connection, kind of like what you were saying about, those people you serve. So how do you work at that? How do you do that well, or keep communication lines open between all of the spread and the different geography that a bank has to take up just by nature of your business?
Yeah, and if you can imagine that, that is something that can be challenging, is how to keep that alive and keep individuals engaged in what you're doing in the workplace. So there's a few things that we do that I think really help bring that to life. And much of what I've talked about, if you can't tell it, we do value a lot of that relationship building, and that does not happen unless you communicate and interact and build camaraderie with others. So, a lot of the things that we try to do is to bring people together, if at all possible. Certainly, when we have 14 different branch locations, that's sometimes difficult to do, but they either find their own, you know, in branch things that they do, but we have monthly huddles, and they're only 15 minutes. But we bring people together either in person, or they can jump online and see and hear us. But it's 15 minutes of different areas of the bank talking about what's going on. And sometimes we talk about trends and our financials. Other times we talk about our latest engagement scores, or some renovations that we're doing in some of our branches, or maybe a upcoming campaign that we're doing to help with business growth. But we're trying to make sure that employees feel well informed, and that's that communication piece that sometimes gets missed in organizations, or maybe they just kind of struggle finding the right way to communicate. I do love a good newsletter, but I'll be honest with you, a lot of times people do not read them. And so you kind of got to gauge that in your organization of, is someone going to read another email and another, piece of paper in front of them? Maybe, maybe not. So make it come alive. If you can't do in person, can you do a video, but make it something interesting that will catch their attention and make sure that they feel like they're still, informed of what's going on. So we take opportunities to do that. We do bring people together once a year for an all employee meeting. We bring employees together to talk about benefits and how to utilize their benefits and things like that. So we always try to think about, where's our opportunity to build that camaraderie, keep the communication flow going, and have it be something where it can be interactive.
I can just hear from what you're saying, the organization is pretty honest too about, is anyone reading the newsletter idea? And I think that can be a hard thing for an organization to do, is really look in the mirror, be honest about what's working for us and what's not working. What should we abandon and try or change or experiment with and do something a little bit differently? A lot of the examples you just shared, doing all hands meetings or coming together to talk about benefits, those all start becoming pieces of how you come together and even what your culture is around communication, around interaction, and getting in front of one another. So all awesome opportunities to do that.
It aligns with you're creating internally what you expect connection with external, you know what I'm saying, with your clients and guests at the bank, which I love that back and forth. Do you have any feedback practices, or do you get feedback from your people, and how do you use that? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in that area?
We do annually ask for feedback from employees, anonymous, confidential, and we review those culture, engagement, whatever you want to call it, workplace experience scores, so that we're very honest and transparent about what our employees are saying, how they're feeling about their work experiences. And the one thing that I shared with employees just this past week, it was this word cloud. So there was an opportunity for employees to describe our culture using 3 words. And so with that, created this word cloud so you could really see visually what people were thinking and feeling. And a lot of the words were things like caring and fun, supportive, positive, family feel. But the biggest one that most people said, community. And I think that's very cool, because community to me means a lot of things, both internally and what we do to bring people together, that they feel supported, but also externally. There's a feeling of, wow, my role here at the bank really does not only impact individuals, but we also can impact our communities in which we live and work. And that's a big deal for Bank 59. So that's something that we feel that's a very important piece of our culture, is to be able to give back, and not just from a monetary standpoint, because yes, we can give donations that way, but of our talents and our time.
And so many of the things you're talking about, those are things that really, in an organization, they come from the top. They come from the senior leadership team. So let's go there for just a moment. Just want to talk about that. I think you have a chance to work pretty closely with some of the members of that senior leadership team. So what do you believe is working so well about, and I'll call it a leadership philosophy. You might have a different word for it, but what do you call that leadership philosophy there at Bank 59? Or what do you see about whatever the philosophy is that resonates so well, not just with your customers, but with your people and the internal side of the business too? How would you describe that?
Honestly, I would describe it using a term that I've heard our president use, and that is servant leadership. Actually, that's 2 words. But yeah, servant leadership in terms of being in a role where you are able to be supportive to the other members of the team, really asking, what do they need? And, understanding what their strengths are and supporting their development in different areas. And I think that's what really can help an organization excel when senior leaders just really understand how important that is for the growth and opportunities for their team, but overall that sense of engagement and belonging and feeling like they are really contributing their strengths to not only help themselves but help the organization at large. And that's just something that I've seen our senior leaders are just, they display that in spades. They really do embody that culture. And that's so important, I think, in an organization to have that start at the top.
Well, and you did share it's part of orientation. When we talk about passion, service was one of the 2 words you shared, enthusiasm and service. So it's something that's taught there. And, it reminds me of part of our philosophy is everyone connects and the importance of the relationship, the importance of people coming together collectively, teamwork and things like that. And the relationship that the leadership team is building is one of service. And I hear that coming from you. So let's stay on this thread. And I want to take it more over to what I think you do a lot of, and that's guiding the learning and the development work that's going on within your organization. Something we found, Shawn and I, working together when we're pulling up with a leadership team, there's never just one track. Sometimes we call it choose your own adventure. It depends on the needs. It depends on the organization and the group and who you're working with. And I believe you have a very similar philosophy. So how does that kind of learning path that it could go a lot of different ways, how does it come to life for Bank 59? How are you leading that today?
Yeah, that's one thing I love talking about because when it does come to leadership and management development, I've found over the years that one size doesn't fit all. I've read a lot and heard a lot, and there's a lot of models and theories out there, which I think is a great starting point, but you got to make that come alive in your organization and make that fit in the values and the culture. And I'm kind of one that leans towards the keep it simple, keep it practical, keep it in a way that's not overwhelming to someone who certainly wants to get to that leadership role. Because I could present 60 different competencies to an employee and say, oh, you got to be good at all of these things and you'll be the best leader. And of course, all of those skills and competencies are important, but you really got to distill it down to what is it that they need. And so I've taken this approach of like one size doesn't fit all. I want to get to know what it is about your style that works well for you. But what are some areas that you find it's a little less comfortable? It's a little more like, I think I want to avoid that. And let's kind of unpack that a little bit and see if we can maybe make that area of your management journey a little bit more comfortable for you. And so I've taken the approach of really setting some very foundational, very simple foundational things for all of our managers to understand kind of what their role is as a manager at Bank 59. And then from there, kind of use assessment tools and different things that are uncovered through coaching to say, okay, well, you know what? You already knock it out of the park in terms of creating an awesome team environment. But I see that probably where you would like a little bit more help is how to have that difficult conversation with someone who isn't maybe performing to a level that you'd like to see. My approach is really more of kind of some people call it micro learning, but just little bits of learning that I can incorporate in your schedule with maybe already naturally existing meetings that it now just becomes the fabric of what we do versus having to take you out of, let's say, a branch where it's really busy and make you go to a class and you don't have time for it and your brain is not thinking, focused on it that day. Let's shake it up a little bit. That would be lovely if I could, have all these classes available for people to take. But if they don't come, or if they come and they can't stay focused at it, that tells me, okay, we just have to change up the delivery pattern a little bit. We can still get this information to you, but let's do it a different way.
I think what you're talking about is something that maybe a lot of traditional learning and development leaders at organizations maybe dream about because they recognize we can cover good things in the classroom. Gosh, I could teach you 60 different models and they're all really smart and really good. And if they're going to help you, but are you going to take that back and you use the word practical? Is it something I can understand quickly? Is it simple? And can I use it right away? And it sounds like you're sort of unlocking a path. It's going to have to be pretty relationship heavy, I would imagine. Lynell, you must really know some of those leaders really well. But I think you're talking about a path that people like me who have some background in learning and development look at and say, like, that's the perfect scenario. How can I do more of that? How can I build that? And I'm sure it wasn't built overnight. I'm sure there's been a road to get there. But one that's focused on someone's personal and professional development. Because, yeah, if you put down the curriculum and say, hey, let's walk through step one before we do step two, step three, you could lose a lot of your students before you even start because they don't need some of those pieces.
And you mentioned sort of micro learning, I believe is a word you used. Something we believe the same thing. What we try to do, and I think it connects to what you said, is that we talk about leadership moments or moments of learning. Those are the critical ones in this fast-paced work life. If you can just do something you can apply in a moment, or that's where you grow and can use it. So I think that connects when you were saying these smaller kind of things really on the job.
Oh, definitely. When you said that moment, it reminded me of something that I feel like the things that I feel really proud about when I look back on my career are not necessarily the big things. I know that's going to sound crazy, like a promotion or, moving to a big job. It's not necessarily that. It's in the little things, in the little moments where over the years I've done a lot of, training and speaking engagements. And so I've had many people in the audience of, what I've been teaching come up to me later on in life and say, "Oh, Liddell, I remember this session that you did. And there was one thing in there that you said that just resonated with me or inspired me." And so I took that, and the next time I was stuck in a conversation or I was working with a difficult person, I thought about that one thing you said, I used it, and it worked. And it turned out better than I ever thought it was going to be. And I hear things like that, and I was like, "Okay, mic drop." Like, I'm this is great. And it's not to say I don't have, novel ideas. I learn from other people. I get inspired. I read, I experience, I make mistakes. And all of those experiences, sometimes I find some things that I'm like, "I think this works." And if you try it, and if it works for you, great. And if it's just that one little simple thing that somebody remembers and uses and it benefits them. I mean, that's just I think that's why I do what I do. I think that's the moments that make me really proud of what I do and how I do it.
I believe that. I can see it in your sort of pride in even talking about that. And I agree 100%. I believe everything comes down to those special moments, Linnell, and you're doing that, I think, in the work you do there and what Bank 59 is trying to do with its teamwork and culture. In the area, I know you like to focus, and you mentioned the word belonging, and I know you have a lot of passion around well-being. Is there anything that's inspiring you now or that you learned or are thinking about bringing into the Bank Five Night culture in either of those areas?
Yeah, something that comes to mind that we do at Bank 59, and it was in existence when I started almost 3 years ago, but we've, kind of it enhanced and modified it a little bit, but it's an opportunity that we take annually, so a week out of the year. It's usually in the fall, and we call it learning camp. So you think of camp as like, you went away to camp for a week and it was a lot of fun. And so I like the way we title it, but it's really meant to bring employees together. It's completely voluntary, but we bring employees together based on the things we've heard that they want to learn more about. So some of it is the banking industry. Some of it is about leadership. Some of it is technology. One of the biggest things I hear about though is well-being. So what I've done is I've brought in many speakers, usually, an average of 20 during that entire week. And there'll be a combination of external and internal. It's a variety of those topics and a variety of speakers, and it allows employees to learn a little bit more. I call it like laying the information in your lap. Like they don't have to go out and seek this information. I've heard what they are interested in, so I'm bringing in experts to come talk about it. And well-being tends to be the one that is the most asked about, asked for topic. And so it's caused me to think about bringing in well-being topics on a more frequent basis than just annually. But it can be, a variety of different topics. I've a lot of employees lately that have been asking about the effects of getting older as you're a woman. And we don't really talk about menopause a lot. And I know that's something that you think, well, is this, for organizations? But yes, it is because employees are wanting to be more well informed about what's happening to them and how that affects them and how that can affect their work life and home life. And so, yes, I think that's all connected. And I think we can all benefit from just having a little bit more information on topics such as that.
That approach, AJ brought up choose your own adventure around learning. It's almost a choose your own adventure around well-being. You're thinking about providing opportunities or access, and then somebody can say, oh, yeah, that hits me, where somebody else say, I don't need that. That's not me. But it shows that one size doesn't fit all, whether it's learning, whether it's life. And so I love that thinking and creating a culture at Bank 59 where you're bringing in experts, you're allowing internal people to share their expertise. Because I could do something, meditation may work for Shawn. How does he do that? And what can I learn from that? So that approach, I think is very forward looking. I still think many organizations are trying to do one size fits all with well-being. And that's why a lot of people just react negatively to it. So I applaud that approach, Lynell. That excites me. I want to join there. How do I sign up and get my tent in the camp for
Open
next
to the
year?
community.
I love that. We've talked a lot, Lynell, and I appreciate you joining us today. Is there anything that, that we haven't mentioned that around culture people that Bank 59 is doing that we should mention?
I think we've covered a lot of it. I think I could go on, and I love talking about our culture at Bank 59. So, we could be talking for hours here, but I do really appreciate how the bank itself just it walks the talk. So, there's another aspect of what we do where we go out in the community and do random acts of kindness. And our president will go out to different businesses and just, give gift cards away to individuals who are shopping at different places. We might go out to dog parks and give little doggy biscuits to cute little critters to bring a smile to someone's face. Can't think of a better way to spend a day. So it's blending those kinds of feelings and thoughts into what we do is really who we are. And I think that's really what has made us a top workplace for 15 years and hopefully counting. And yeah, it's very rewarding to work in a place like that.
It sounds like it. I want to work there.
Well, I do hiring, so
We talked about so much, Lynell, today. I just wanted to wrap up with some highlights that jumped out at me, from the conversation today. One, back where we started, I always want to emphasize, because I think it's so important right now. You mentioned this thing about, we were just having fun. You said this finding joy, and these moments of joy that can re-energize you, we need to prioritize those. So, and I know that really wasn't even a part of what we were going with, but I think it's such a moment that I think leaders, people in organizations need to focus on and prioritize. So I want to call that out. Another thing that we talked about were your strong values and how you work to make those values active and show how they come across and how they live in the organization. And I do think listeners, that's something we work with a lot of our clients around to really activate and make those come alive on a day-to-day basis and across people touch points in an organization. I heard that in what you said, so I want to highlight that. Another thing, we talked about choosing our own adventure and learning as well as in well-being. And I do think that practice is a forward-looking practice versus trying to make everybody fit into certain kind of paths that way. So I want to call that out and encourage people to explore that. And then finally, the last thing, we talked about purpose, you talked about serving others, you talked about servant leadership, and then you talked about community. And there's something about those things that to me all go together, like a great handshake. And I'm sure that happens there at the bank. And I do hear that. And it sounds foundational to your culture. It sounds very natural. And you've done great things to bring that alive, both role modeling from leaders, as well as then just in your initiatives and even your approach and how you start with orientation and then take them through their life there at the organization. So that jumps out at me as well, as that whole community spirit as part of what you're doing to build your culture. If people want to find out more about Bank 59 and you, Lynell, where do people find you, connect with you, learn more about, where would you guide listeners to learn more about what you're doing there at Bank 59?
Well, I would definitely say, check us out. Our website is all spelled out, bank59.com. We are on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, that would be fantastic. And even if, anyone wants to just kind of continue a conversation and talk, I love meeting new people and hearing what they have to say. I'm just, yeah, I'd be delighted to do that.
That's great. So you heard that. Take time, reflect on your culture, get out there, interact with people. And now you've got a new connection with Lynell here. See what they're doing at Bank 59. And it's all about, this passion. You have to really care about people and you have to want to, make those small moment changes in adding something new to the way you interact and connect, communicate, converse, well-being, belonging. You got it. Lynell, thanks so much for being on the show today. I know AJ and I have a lot of sort of takeaways that we'll be following up with you on for sure. Remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can learn more at humanworks8.com/podcast. And if you want to know, Lynell's given me some things to wonder about. And if you want to know what I'm wondering about, you can subscribe to my Wondering Wednesday blog on LinkedIn. Every week, I'm wondering about something new. And a lot of those come from conversations like this. So Lynell, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for inviting me in and I'd love to talk more.
The door is open. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Now it's up to you. See you next time.